Good evening and welcome to the 2022 Black History Celebration here at the Newark Public Library. My name is Dale Colston and I'm a librarian at the James Brown African American Room of the Newark Public Library in Newark, New Jersey. On behalf of our director, Jocelyn Bowling Dixon, and Board of Trustees President, Dr. Lauren Wells, we thank you all for joining us this evening. I would like to acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Lenni Lenape First Nations on which we are learning, laboring, and organizing today. We also recognize the devastation and the continued legacy of the transatlantic slave trade, which contributed to present-day systemic racism and oppression. Our space at the library, the James Brown African American Room, was named in honor of the late James Library Brown, a librarian, poet, activist, and influencer who was instrumental in making sure that the library seek and maintain books and resources and present programs examining and celebrating the African American experience. Mr. Brown was especially committed to urging Newark youth to pursue education and to understand the importance of the library in their academic growth. This year's Black History Celebration, entitled Acquired Taste, Contributions of the African Diaspora to Food Culture in the Americas, explores Black culinary traditions. Centuries ago, enslaved Africans brought with them to the Americas crops they knew, farming expertise, and keen agricultural management skills. Since then, Africans and African Americans have shaped cuisine and food culture in a multitude of ways. Our series will celebrate soul food, talk with celebrity chefs and cookbook authors, examine food insecurity, and investigate ongoing battles for justice for Black farmers. This evening's program, Can I Fix You a Plate? Black Restaurants and Hospitality, showcases an impressive panel whose members will explore and celebrate our rich history in restaurants, catering, barbecue, and alcohol and spirits, ongoing struggles and achievements in the industry, and the future of Black restaurants will also be discussed. We have four wonderful panelists with us this evening: Kai Campbell, Roger Apollon Jr., Adrian Miller, and Therese Nelson. Now I want to bring on my colleague, fellow James Brown African American Room librarian Reggie Blanding, who will introduce Ms. Nelson, who will begin our program with the presentation. He'll be back after that to introduce the rest of our panel. Reggie?
Peace, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. Very excited for this whole program, and very excited to introduce the sister here, Therese Nelson. Just a few words about Therese. She is a Newark native, raised in the Weequahic section neighborhood. She visited our Weequahic branch library, attended a magnet high school, and imagines herself heading towards an engineering career. Today, Ms. Nelson is a chef, writer, podcast host, and founder of BlackCulinaryHistory.com, an amazing website and social network she established in 2008 to connect chefs of color, preserve Black heritage throughout the African Atlantic, promote and share the work of her colleagues, and preserve the legacy being constructed by Black food creatives for future generations. So it's my honor to welcome and bring on Sister Therese Nelson.
Thank you so much, Reggie, for that really beautiful and generous introduction. Again, my name is Therese Nelson, and being at the Newark Public Library, albeit virtually, is a profoundly full circle moment. When Dr. Colston reached out over the summer, the feeling of sort of coming home was profound, because the Newark Public Library, particularly the James Brown Room, was such a part of my upbringing. This opportunity to speak to you all really quickly ahead of our really dynamic conversation is important, because I think this is one of the few programs that I've been a part of that really does center the professional restaurant space, the professional hospitality space. But the work I do is really concerned with the historical legacy that tells us an alternative story about who constructed American cuisine. I think a big part of this grounding for me is my personal story. Like Reggie said, I grew up in Newark in a time where organizations like the New Community Corporation saw and understood that food and hospitality was a vital part of any city's kind of foundation or sort of mobility. And I went to culinary school in a time where the stories we were being told and trained suggested that this American idea of food and gastronomy was Eurocentric through a really marginal, disingenuous story of what hands who contribute to and constructed what we thought of as uniquely American cuisine. And at the time in my career where I was really starting to find myself and sort of trying to find myself in the work I wanted to do, to sort of be subliminally told that I was a guest in an industry that intuitively I knew had to be untrue, but couldn't quite find a language for, was troubling. And so I started to ask myself serious questions about what Black history looked like through the lens of this industry that I had given my life over to. And I started to read. I started to read books like Psyche Forson's Building Houses Out of Chicken Legs, where she beautifully laid out this robust story of Black people and Black hands from the enslaved kitchens of Monticello, where James Hemings brought us our first culinary school, from the Haitian and Caribbean patriots who left the Caribbean, came to places like Philadelphia and created this robust ecosystem for gastronomy in a time where the stories we tell ourselves are told about Black mobility and agency are primarily through the life of the enslaved. And so when you start reading these stories and find this evidence through the lens of professional gastronomy, professional cooking, restaurateurs, hoteliers, brewers, distillers, winemakers, we get to tell ourselves different stories about who we are and who owns and who contributed primarily to this American experiment. I think a lot about Newark and the stories that I took for granted growing up here. I don't know how many of our viewers are from Newark, but we lost Jay's Restaurant right downtown Newark in 2019. And something about the story of not just soulful restaurants, but entrepreneurs who, in this moment of the Black Power movement in the late 60s and 70s, who were part of this new way of thinking of American restaurant industry that provided us these legacy restaurants that still are holding on today, trying to stay open, trying to carry on this very clear culinary voice that Black folks have been instrumental in constructing, that we're losing these restaurants in ways that I think are troubling, but that we have on this panel folks who are doing primary work that is carrying on legacy of restaurants like Jay's and Sylvia's in Harlem and Mama Dib's in North Carolina and restaurants all over the country. And so, I don't know, I'm really excited and inspired by culinary history, particularly Black culinary history, because it's a very clear lens that tells us about Black life and uses the language of food and hospitality in beautiful and intentional ways. I'm excited to be part of this panel. You have the benefit of folks like Adrian Miller, who has written some of the most kinetic work we have that tell us about ourselves. But I don't know, I just think that there's so much to be said, but that the history of who we are is right here in plain sight. And I don't know, it's the primary work that I do through my website and a site that I think more of us should be interested in, because the stories there are so right and beautiful and kinetic.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that great introduction, Sister Nelson. And yeah, appreciate, and you're part of that work and that legacy, keeping those names alive and, helping us, stay resilient and push forward. So thank you again for being here. I'm super excited for this program. And I do want to introduce our other panelists as well. So we start with Brother Roger Apollon Jr. Roger has been a craft beer fanatic for more than 15 years. Founders Brewing Backwoods Bastard, that's the name of the brew, was the revelatory brew that led him to form the Brew Council, a monthly tasting group that met in his dining room. As Roger's palate developed, the council hosted themed tastings and visited 100+ breweries. He went on to find mentors and inspirations at breweries like Other Half and Brooklyn Brewing. He also found in the community of the Oranges friends and neighbors who encouraged him to follow his dream, one that I've personally gotten to benefit from in my visits to Four City. So yes, appreciate that. Prior to his creative outlet at FourCityBrewing in Orange, Roger's career path led him to 15 years in New York's fashion industry and 16 years as a physical education teacher. And for all that time, he has been an active musician and singer, founding ska and reggae bands Bigger Thomas, Rude Boy George, and Heavensby. Born here in Newark, Roger grew up in West Orange, attended high school in East Orange, and graduated from Rutgers University in New Brunswick, Brethren. He and Sally, his wife of 25 years, have 2 sons, Jax and Anthony. What free time remains to him is devoted to his favorite soccer team, Tottenham Hotspur. Thank you, Brother Roger.
Thank you, Reggie, Brother Reggie. Man, this is a real honor, real honor. Meeting Reggie, and I know Kai and everybody, and Therese, that intro just, and thank you, Dale. Anyway, Adrian, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And then another guest that's going to be blessing us this evening is Brother Adrian Miller. His background, Brother Adrian Miller received an A.B. in International Relations from Stanford University in 1991, and his J.D. from the Georgetown University Law Center in 1995. From 1999 to 2001, Brother Miller served as special assistant to President Bill Clinton with his Initiative for One America, the first freestanding office in the White House to address issues of racial, religious, and ethnic reconciliation. He went on to serve as senior policy analyst for Colorado Governor Bill Ritter. From 2004 to 2010, he served on the board for the Southern Foodways Alliance. In June 2019, he lectured in the Masters of Gastronomy program at the Slow Food University in Palenzo, Italy. He is currently the executive director of the Colorado Council of Churches, and as such is the first African-American and the first lay person to hold that position. So peace, thank you for blessing us with your presence tonight.
Oh, no, man, this is the blessing for me. So good to be with you all.
Appreciate
Looking
you.
forward to chopping it up.
Yeah.
And last, but definitely not least, Brother Kai Campbell, born and raised in the city of Newark, New Jersey. He self-describes himself as an envisionary, although I also second that. He's definitely an envisionary, worthy of that title. He's been working in distressed urban development. Kai worked first as a municipal economist, later running his own shop. Kai has worked in the arena of economic development his entire career, helping to change culture and skylines in urban markets, especially Newark's. Kai is behind Walla Food and Beverage Group, which oversees the Walla, a place I'm very familiar with. Fragments Delicatessen, also familiar with, and The Yard, all great Newark-based food establishments. Kai looks to fundamentally change the trajectory of Newark's food and culture scene. He and his team aim to provide a standard of service typically not reserved for communities like Newark. He's also launching a new culture brand, Onomatopoeia, hopefully I got that, commentary and exercise platforms. Kai, like his parents, is an activist whose mediums of choice are economics and planning. He's also co-parenting 2 young girls in Newark.
Sorry if you hear them in the background right now.
That's all right.
It was an ice cream night so that they would be quiet. So. Not old enough for that 4 City yet, but you know.
Okay.
Yeah, man, that lamb and feta burger though, at the Walla though, I'll just say you get the golf clap, bro.
I appreciate it. Listen, I'm honored to be here, and you know, it's a testament to the Black diaspora. You know, it's almost, you know, Therese mentioned this being full circle. I didn't know that she was from Newark. I didn't know Roger was from Newark and is a singer. I'm a big Tottenham fan. Almost went to London, studied in London for grad school.
What?
And, you know, to hear Adrian, I think you may even know my brother. He went to Georgetown for law school, Charles Waddell. Y'all may
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this is like, you know, I say in certain spheres, you know, Black folks are just, you know, it's 1 degree of separation. Forget 7 degrees of separation. So this is just, you know, we're always where we're supposed to be, you know. So I appreciate y'all for having me here, you know, Reggie and Dale, and I always appreciate you and the entire staff at the library for just, you know, being great neighbors and, you know, stewards of everything culture-based in Newark, especially for what y'all are doing with Black culture and making sure that it's an integral part of the library experience here in Newark is very, very, very important. And I'm super honored to be here. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Thank you. We are grateful to be able to do and continue this work that all of us are doing. And we hope the ancestors are pleased with what we're doing. So let's start with, since we're talking about food and eating, let's talk about, we can just go around your earliest memory of a favorite food, and anybody could just jump on in.
My family's from Haiti. They met in Brooklyn. I was born in Newark, lived on South Munn in East Orange. My earliest, I'm the oldest of 20 grandchildren. My mom is the oldest of 12. First one came to America and brought everybody over one by one as a registered nurse. So I remember being a kid in Brooklyn at Sunday dinner, being under the table and seeing all these pairs of feet around the table. I could tell each who my aunts and uncles were by their shoes and by their feet. And for me, they call it riz national, but it's the Haitian brown rice and beans. That's a staple of their diet. When I smell it, when I see it, it just, even now, just, you know, I remember my youngest memory at 5 years old, when that rice is on your plate, it's family. So that whenever and my mom makes it, she lives with us now, a strong 86 years old.
Amen.
And when she makes that, she used to make a lot more, but when she makes that, I'm in heaven.
I mean, so Therese she mentioned Jay's, and, you know, if we're going to talk about Newark restaurants and the food culture here, you know, you have to mention places like Jay's, John's. Yes. The owner of John's just recently passed away. We lost a lot of giants from either not if they're restaurateurs or lounge owners or bar owners over this pandemic. But for me, I grew up on 10th Street, and my grandmother, you know, I did not taste stuff from the grocery store. She grew a lot of her own fruits and vegetables. So cucumbers, tomatoes, I remember just putting salt in my hand and dipping a cucumber or a tomato and you just biting it, you know. She made her own wine because we had grapes grown in the vine, you know, stuff like that. but it's something like I will try for the rest of my life to try to replicate the biscuits from Miss D's, you know? And it is one of those things, and I live in that neighborhood again, and we now, since we've purchased Bragman's, you know, I'm in that neighborhood all the time now, and it's just, I see kids walking by, and I'm upset that they don't know that existed.
Yeah.
That smell when they waft out the door or something like that we're not having those types of experiences anymore. You know what I mean? So that when kids come into our store now, it means that much to me, because I'm like, this is what I remembered. You know what I mean? We need to have places. We are losing places where we just feel, and where we can be joyous, we can be free, and we can just be, you know what I mean? And we can not be those things and still be there, you know what I mean? So for me, it was Miss D's biscuits. If it wasn't, you know, literally the fruits and vegetables grown on 10th Street and Avon Avenue.
I think for me, it was sage sausage. My grandparents are the second wave of the Great Migration. So they're from this very particular part of South Carolina, right after the border, in a town called Latta. And they came up north in the mid-60s and settled in Central Ward. And then after the riots, white flight, they settled in the Weequahic section. And we grew up on Hansberry between Parkview and Bergen. And Maple Avenue, that corridor, Maple Avenue and Bergen both had these really vibrant entrepreneurial corridors where Black butchers and bakers sort of use the opportunity of white flight to sort of create these amazing businesses. And growing up, I didn't know it. It's only in retrospect, after I had went away to college and got all this training and thought I was something, that the memories that I had growing up of food were put into context. And the sage sausage that is the smell of my Sunday mornings was actually a friend of theirs who was from the same town in Latta, who had a butcher shop off of Maple Avenue. My grandpa would just come magically with this bag of sage sausage once a week. And it was from his people from Latta, and it was their way of placemaking, right? Their way of tasting home in this really intentional way. So think a lot about those small shops that don't exist anymore, but were these little acts of resistance that, I mean, I can taste the sage in that sausage right now. And it's such a particular part of like carrying on those traditions and new places, which I think is really the story of all of our sort of culinary history.
Mm. Yeah, the food from my childhood that just keeps calling my name is lemon icebox pie. Now, if you've never had lemon icebox pie, imagine a key lime pie, except you have a lemon custard, right? And then the crust is made out of crushed vanilla wafers glued together with melted butter. And then you put a meringue on that, refrigerate it. Oh man, that's the thing. And my mom used to make that it was a summer dessert originally. So we would have it on the 4th of July. Well, for us, summer was Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day. But man, that thing was so good. We just had it year round. So it would show up for Thanksgiving, Christmas, whenever. That's the one that I remember.
That sounds delicious.
It is, man. It is slamming. If you
Yo,
like key lime
that's
pie, yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's slamming.
That sounds crazy. Anyway,
Yeah.
I need to eat that soon.
I guess just another, I know we've got sort of catered to individual questions, but I guess one more, just a quick follow-up on that. And this could kind of maybe be a segue, but we did want to ask who maybe some of the chefs, brewers that either guided or inspired you in your work. So maybe just even laid the foundation for the careers that, brought you here.
Yeah, for me, that's really easy. Garrett Oliver at Brooklyn Brewing. I got into craft beer 15 years ago. Literally, I was always a beer drinker, and my first, growing up Haitian Catholic, I didn't drink a beer or touch any substance until I was in college at New Brunswick. That's why I went to New Brunswick. I was smart enough to way home, so they couldn't come in and visit. You feel me? They had to. We're coming down. This is before cell phones. I could clean up all my stuff. But I had my full beer at Rutgers, and I had a Budweiser at a keg party. It was terrible. but I still kept drinking because everybody around me thought it was good. But long story short, I always liked beer. And when I moved back to New Jersey 16 years ago, you know, I just started getting into flavor beer, and I'm looking around, I'm saying, all right, you know, where are the other brothers and sisters in this thing? Just naturally, because you just figure. And by the way, sidebar, I feel like I never understood like the Avengers movies, like, you know, how they have these collection of superheroes. Like, I don't get that. That's really corny. I kind of get it now. Like, I feel like I'm around like everybody's like an only, right? Like, we're the only where we are, or we're the few. So we're kind of like congregated anyway. But I didn't have, there was no other brothers and sisters, no Black people doing craft beer. But all my friends who were Black, or a lot of friends, Black and white, whatever they were diverse. So Garrett Oliver popped up when I looked up Black-owned breweries, and I never met him up until he put out a book called the Oxford Compendium, or on my desk back here somewhere.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
You know, the librarians love this part, right? People showing their books. We love
I think I
this.
just broke stuff back here, but as the Oxford Compendium to beer, that was crazy. So he promoted it at a wine shop called Monte Vino in Montclair, and I met him, and I couldn't, like, you know, I'm not very easily, like, you know, I grew up in, you know, Newark, but I lived in New York for 15 years, so I'm not, you know, I'm not faded by famous people, like whatever, DiCaprio, whatever, sitting next to me, your breath stinks, whatever. But I was like so nervous, like, oh my gosh, you know, and the first thing I said, so, you know, I looked around, make sure it was safe. It was like, you know, because there's mad white people around. I was like, so, oh, can I have another Pilsner? Yeah, yeah, please. March. Yeah, yeah. So I looked around, I was like, yo. So I was like, so, you know, what's it like being the only one? And he was like, started laughing. He was like, well, you know, honestly, he said the best thing about it is they're gonna remember your name. They will remember you. And I was like, Like, I thought he'd be on some like, man, it's messed up. I'm out here trying to, you know, do my stuff. People are like fading me, but he didn't mention any of that. He was like, they're gonna remember your name, and that's an advantage. So I just figured if they'll focus on me anyway, I might as well be the best. And I was like, right? And that was and from that point on, he signed my book. But that for me, and he signed the book like, welcome to the party. I was like, I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but for me, when you have a man like that who literally, there's no blueprint, you know, and that's what I'm finding with all our ancestors, you know, there was no blueprint for this stuff. It, you know, white people had mentors, right? You can go to the library, right, and find out your ancestors in the library. I can't find my ancestors in the library. My wife is English. You know, when we go to England and visit her family, the local library, she can trace her families literally back to the caves, like literally like in the library. So when I go to the library, you know, I don't find this, there's no reference point. So having Garrett Oliver there as that guiding light of, not only is he the only Black person, because he could have been the only Black person and been whack, right? You know what I'm saying? Now we'd be like, yeah, he's the only Black person, but you know, damn, right? That's why they're not in this game, because he's trash. But he was like, no, he's actually strapped and he's actually doing it. And actually, you should be following what he's doing. That for me was the inspiration. Thank you so much. So, yeah, that just, like, for me, and then he's an unusual guy anyway, right? So he wears wild clothes. He always posts up his old, he makes fun of himself, posts up these pictures from the 80s. He got like, you know, the gloves with the fingers cut off, and, you know, the shag, you know, the Lionel Richie shag with the leather jacket, you know what I'm saying? Which I would never put up. Although I had the Todd Willis shag, no gas, but you know what I'm saying? Like, but he's an icon for me. So I'm hoping, and probably you guys feel the same way too, that I'm that for the next generation. You know, because I want to be a blueprint. You know, everybody's at the hip hop. Jay-Z, that Blueprint album, it's like, he's not stupid. Like, it's literally like, you know, I want to put out a blueprint. If my business plan, you know. If business plans were albums, you know, my business plan will hopefully be the blueprint, right? Or Ready to Die, you know what I'm saying? One of those, you know. Anyway.
Representation.
Right?
Oh man, appreciate it. Thank you, Raj. And anybody else who wants to pick up on that same question, I guess the your guidance or maybe who you would consider foundational in your work or.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's Edna Lewis, the late Edna Lewis,
yeah.
one of the greatest chefs. And
Yeah.
I still think relatively unknown for someone of her stature. But yeah, her taste of country cooking was a revelation. And that's, it's a great book. And then I just read a lot of her stuff and interviews and things like that. Now, she would never call her cooking soul food. I don't get that twisted. But she really illuminated my thinking and gave me a lot of leads to pursue. So I always think of her.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I love taste. I loved her In Pursuit of Flavor, actually, is my favorite of hers. Because it was her, how she actually cooked in her, like later in her life, like what her kitchen really felt and looked like. I would say culinarily, I mean, there's so many chefs that I think if we move the lens or move the center of the culinary world into Black culture, there are so many people that I was not aware of, but in retrospect, were right there in plain sight for me to have examples of. I would say, I mean, the list is literally too numerous to list. Somebody I'm on a hunt of that anybody who's hearing this can give me some profound leads. There's a woman named Cleo Johns who I am desperately searching for more information about, who was in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, was lauded on New York Times and all kinds of publications as sort of a go-to caterer in tri-state area. She operated out of Maplewood, New Jersey.
Oh my gosh. I think my father used to work for her.
I see, this is why I had to say something, because
Cleo.
She's a footnote in the book called Hot Box by the Lee brothers. And she has 2 notes in that book. But for me, I always wanted to be a caterer. The math in restaurants, respectfully, Kai, you can attest to the math in restaurants being very tricky. And I was never sort of suited for the ways in which I was being taught you were going to be able to navigate the restaurant space. And so catering always felt like home to me. And women like Miss Johns was so instrumental to my sort of affirmation about myself. But to Adrian's point about writers, I mean, I think to your point about Miss Lewis, 100% for me in the work I'm doing now culturally, Freddie Mae Grosvenor is critical to my thinking and the practice I use for my work. She was a daughter of the Low Country of South Carolina. She wrote a book called Vibration Cooking, or The Travel Notes of a Geechee Girl. And she was one of the first writers who told me, I mean, Miss Lewis certainly, but Freddie Mae was irreverent about placemaking and about the joyfulness of Black culture and was not apologetic about it. She saw the rest of the world and said, what do you have that is better than what we have in our culture? And it's like, not much. And she also wrote a book called Thursdays and Every Other Sunday Off in 72 that really sort of demanded that we look at hospitality workers and domestic workers in particular as the heroes of American cooking. And 50 years later, we are listening to everything she had to say. If we had been more mindful then, what would our industry look like today?
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
my dad, and I think a lot of men in that generation, bartending was a little side job that they did at night, weekends. And my dad used to work with my uncles for a caterer called Growlick. And Growlick was a caterer, not from where I am now, up in kind of West Orange, kind of Orange. And I remember many, many times Miss Cleo calling the house and asking if he was available. So let me see what else. A lot of people are gone now, but let's see what else we might find. And speaking of Sister Lewis, our late Sister Lewis, I remember she was on a television show and she said one of the hardest things she ever did was write a cookbook because they kept asking her how much. And she's like, I don't know how much, just a pinch, or this much, or, they wanted her to really quantify how much salt, how much, and she's like, she said it was the hardest thing, one of the hardest things she ever did. But yeah, she was absolutely phenomenal. Kai, you have someone, surely?
I mean, everybody that has been mentioned already, but I mean, for me, I'm not a trained culinary person. I was trained how to use a knife. That's it. And then everything else is pretty much osmosis. And it's my grandfather, I was lucky enough, my grandfather owned 2 restaurants in New Jersey. He moved up from the South as a chef because he couldn't get work in the South. With my grandmother, who was a nurse, she couldn't get work in the South, so they both moved up to New Jersey. That's why I'm here. But it's really, we ran the house like they ran the kitchen at the restaurants, you know. And in some instances, for the majority of a lot of folks' lives in my family, they kept kosher because the restaurants were kosher establishments, you know. So for me, it's my mama, my grandmama. I'm going to LA to see my grandmother this weekend. You know, it's really just the people in my family. I've been super fortunate enough to have people around me where food is our biggest source of community, you know. So it's really just learning from them and knowing that if I knew how to use a knife, I could get a job anywhere in America.
Okay.
Which is still true, you know.
Very true.
Yeah, yeah. If we could just go back to women for a second. Sister Nelson, can you just maybe discuss a little bit victories and challenges that women faced in the industry? Maybe a woman starting on her own, or a woman who was next in line from the family who was expected to continue that restaurant, and anyone else who had women that they saw running restaurants or catering business, please add to that. Thank you.
One of my favorite examples is Melba Wilson. Melba Wilson is Harlem-based. She is the niece, I believe, of Sylvia Woods. And I mean, I think the example of, I mean, Kai, I would love to talk to you after this about your family story, but this idea around passing the baton, like a clean generational baton pass, is such an interesting idea. Being able to stay open long enough to have a restaurant that you could bequeath to a next generation is tricky. But Melba in particular is somebody who I really admire, and really the whole Woods family for keeping Sylvia's open is a very dope example. But it's the women in that family who are kind of carrying on that tradition. Melba is one of the most instrumental voices we have in Harlem, who is trying to keep modern restaurants viable, between Harlem Eat Up, between her rethinking and kind of standing her ground on the West Side around Restaurant and Row. She's a visionary, and I think I admire her a lot in terms of her ability to be clear. Think about the council family in North Carolina. Mama did a restaurant has existed with a story that is so inspirational that I am profoundly inspired every single time I listen to the council family talk about it. But everyone in that family is writing books and developing other brands and businesses derivative from the family hub. Area Council is about to come up with a beautiful cookbook. There's such a kinetic power in the women in our industry today. I would say that for Black women in particular, my experience has always been this feeling of, especially working for other people, one of the reasons why I went into my own business is because you find yourself in these spaces where you are the emotional hub for emotional support for the men in your space. You either I've always been the only Black woman, sometimes the only woman in the space. And being excellent is not a question, but having that, I'll say this. I remember working in Charleston, South Carolina, watching women who for 40 years were holding together the restaurants of Charleston, the hotels of Charleston, together with the taste buds that they were bequeathed by their grandmas and aunties, all of this. And we're never going to be the executive chefs of the restaurants that they were holding together, watching men come and go, watching culinarians come and go. But they did that work. They did that work, and the taste of she crab soup and Huguenot torts and hummingbird cakes are maintained as the heirloom of Charleston. But these women did that work and do that work without any visibility. And I don't know, it's a humbling idea, but it's sort of time for us to see them as full and brilliant. And I don't know, visibility is an affectation, but it is unconscionable that we accept and taste the work and the labor of these women, but don't give them name and don't give them sort of pride of place in the way we talk about the food they created.
Sister Dale, can I add on to that and give a little twist? So I love to talk about the role of Black women in barbecue because the way that barbecue is presented, it's often presented as dude food, right? But that's not the case in the Black community. I mean, from the earliest days, Black women have been involved in barbecue. A lot of barbecue restaurants are named after women. You know, Black men will say, "I got this recipe from my mama." Even in my own family, my late mother, Janetta Miller, she was the griller in chief in my family. So in my book, one of the best anecdotes that I found is I found the story of a woman named Mary John, who in 1840s Arkansas, she was what we would call a pitmaster today. So there was a newspaper article about her running a barbecue in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, July 4th, 1840, and they called her the superintendent. That's the 19th century word for pitmaster. And so this Black woman was in charge. So this Black woman telling dudes what to do in the 1840s, and she made enough money being loaned out to do barbecues that she bought her freedom. And when she died, she was eulogized in the white newspaper in a way that a chef would be eulogized. I mean, there was some racism thrown in there, right? I mean, but still, she got her shout out. So I just want to say that, you know, sisters have been grilling it for themselves for a long time.
Yeah, and thanks to brother Adrian for the alley-oop for this, because obviously in brewing, so it used to be, the belief was up until 2 years ago that the oldest functioning brewery existed in Belgium. 2 years ago, they found the oldest functioning brewery, surprise, surprise, in Egypt. Okay. That's step one. Step two, in Africa, if you go to Africa, traditional African societies that still make beer, you'll find that it's the women who brew. Men don't brew beer in Africa. The pubs in England, the public houses, the brewing was done by the women. Women have long been associated with brewing and cooking for centuries. It's to your point, Adrian, craft beer is viewed as what? Dude beer, right? You know, it's all white bearded dudes. And they, you know, they're the brewers, but this is a new creation, born out of, you know, wealth and whatever. But yeah, again, brewing bears the same thing. Women are the backbone. Again, not a surprise. Black women especially are the backbone of brewing. There was, you know, there's a handful of Black-owned breweries. There's less than a handful of women-owned breweries. I know one in the area called Talia in New York, but that's about it. So, and then Backward Flag in New Jersey, which is woman-owned and veteran-owned. But yeah, the representation, but that story needs to be told. And I think once people understand the history, the true history, like most things, CBT, it would be critical beer theory, I guess, right? You know, right? People can get down to the brass tacks of what it's all about. That's all I'm gonna say.
All right.
But if you look at the generation of young and up and coming chefs, I mean, the majority of the most heralded young Black chefs are women, you know what I mean? And pushing the culture, and they're leading with culture, you know what I mean? So, and it is not just like Roger talked about Egypt, right? We could go throughout the entire diaspora, whether or not you're in the Caribbean, there's some sisters that are birthing some serious work. I mean, you know, I just came back and, you know, was talking about Nina Compton from St. Lucia. You got Mashama Bailey from the South. You got people that are just not that are super young, like Kia Damon, like, you know, these people that are just like out here and like I said, they're leading with the culture. You know, I talked about influences, but it's Mrs. Sutton. Everybody talks about Jay's and they remember when Mrs. Sutton passed, you know what I mean? I don't remember that just because, you know, their son and my brother are best friends or something like that. But that is like, you know, those are folks that we would have parades down, you know, now it's not Broad Street anymore, it's Kenneth Gibson Boulevard, but you know, it's one of those things that they led with that culture. I said Miss D's, you know what I mean? It wasn't Mr. D's. So for me, especially, it is, even though my grandfather was the chef, I'm researching all my grandmother's and my mother's and my aunt's recipes mostly, you know what I mean? Because he was like a tactician almost with some good recipes, but those recipes were, you know, where that foundation came from our home, you know, which was the women.
Just FYI, there are 3 or 4 or 5 names that came up about chefs that I've heard that I've never heard before. So I don't know if there's a transcript or whatever, but I'd like to double back on all those names.
Yeah, this is being recorded, and in a few days will be available on our YouTube channel. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I guess, definitely, of course, the title here is Black Restaurants. So maybe Kai, you may want to pick up on this here because, of course, we're still in this ongoing moment of the pandemic. And
With the pandemic, I'll try.
yeah. But, particular, I think there's 2 questions I'm looking at here. So I'll kind of combine them. I know Newark and Essex County, of course, were definitely hit hard, and some eating and drinking establishments, adapted or continuing to adapt. There's been things like curbside pickups, to-go cups, permitted or not, potentially, and the occasional food truck. So, we want to ask, first of all, should Black restaurateurs rely on these new waves to reach folks, or, do you foresee us going back to sort of tried and true table service?
Well, so a restaurant is a business, right? And it's not necessarily, it can, for the customer, because it can become a communal hangout place, but for the owner, it's a business. And your primary function is to prepare, make money to provide for your staff's family and your own family. So for me, in business, you always have to be on a pivot. It's like basketball. I'm always on a pivot. I don't know which way I'm going to go. I'm going to wait for the defender to show me his hand, and then I'm going to make my move. And like all things, you have to try to think, my father would be ad nauseum. What's your 1-week plan? What's your 1-month plan? What's your 1-year plan? What's your 3-year plan? What's your 5-year plan? And, in reality, it doesn't always work out that way. But if you have a good plan and you rely on your training and, if you're religious about that, you can try to adapt. And part of, that is just being, open to the possibility. So what you saw is, like, I have friends, KB's Barbecue in Irvington, right? They pivoted, they've been killing it, putting out some really good barbecue, but getting good business, even in opening up a second location that does a different type of product. But you have to be willing to adapt. For instance, we opened the yard, we got the approvals to open the yard 2 weeks before the pandemic hit, right? So we didn't open for an entire year. And that was supposed to be a story of the diaspora. It was supposed to be not high-end cuisine, but it was supposed to be elevated, but still fun and whimsical and just enjoyable. But instead, I had to rely on what I knew, because I was like, I have to pay bills. You know what I mean? We have a lot of money invested, and this is a business. But as a business that is trying to stay true to my brand, what can we do that allows us to adapt but stay true to who we are, right? And I think that's what folks really have to do. Like, no, I'm not going to all of a sudden sell you spaghetti because that's easy, or something like that, or ramen or something like, not that those things are easy when done well. But my thing is, we had to pivot. So now I sell you a shrimp burger and oxtail burger, as opposed to, the duck jambalaya that I was going to do. You know what I mean? So I think that as the nation recovers, and as a community, really a community, because we can talk about the nation all you want, but we function as a very small town. Newark is a very small town. And, for me, and when I look and business still asks me for advice, you have to be hyper local in your thinking as a restaurant right now, right? Unless you're on Gold Belly and you're shipping your sauce across to LA from New Jersey, your customer is within a certain radius of you, right? And you have to be willing to pivot to suit the needs of your community. So for instance, I can't do what Jersey City has done, because it's much more active in terms of pedestrian traffic. So I have to say, well, Newark is a car-centric town. Okay, I have to be on Uber Eats. I have to be on DoorDash. I may not want to do those things because I want the presentation of this oxtail burger and these fries to not travel 30 minutes, but that's the pivot. You know what I mean? And so, but we will pivot in other ways. And now you'll see when we release this new menu to change with the times and hopefully, unfortunately, do what we were intended to do, always at the right time,
Yeah, Kai, thank you. I mean, again, I've been to Burger Wala a few times, and it's, the quality, but the pivot. I mean, we opened 8 months before the pandemic, right? 80% of our business was tap room, 20% was distribution. The pandemic comes, the tap room disappears, and now we're learning to sell beer by curbside, which you've never done before. And then New Jersey passes a special dispensation for us to deliver home delivery, which you've never done before, that we had to figure out on the fly. My two business partners, and my taproom manager, 4 of us, we worked 30 days in a row without a break. Coming to the tap room, it was like, and I was delivering beer in my car. We all deliver beer in our car. And I deliver 4 or 5 deliveries, come back to the brewery, load it up with 5 more and go back. And Ashley, our person, was there. But to your point, the pivot, and honestly, I don't wish, COVID was not, a great thing, and I didn't think it was a great thing at all. However, I feel like it reminded me of what life is really about. You got to understand, our ancestors, when you think about, and now that it's Black History Month, the Lewis Gates, session on the Reconstruction. The Reconstruction is hitting me very heavily right now. There's precedent for what we're doing. There's precedent. And the fact that, there was active whatever to cut it down, and the fact that we're back again, relatively just as renaissance of this, but this is in our DNA, resilience, resistance, no matter what we do as people, our mere existence, our mere success is an act of rebellion. And we pay a heavy price for that. And our ancestors paid a very heavy price for being successful. And it's one of those things that I feel like COVID reminded us that, there is a price to this thing. There's no guarantees. And our ancestors had to pivot. People could say after Reconstruction, we could have just been like, oh, well, it's a wrap, whatever. Yet still, we managed to get one of us in the highest office in the country, even after such a setback. So for me, I feel COVID is a great leveler. Sorry, Kai.
There's opportunity to that too. Like we can quote Reconstruction, right? But there were, we had more elected officials at higher levels right after Reconstruction, during that time period. So we have to look at it as a community and say, hey, listen, we have the spotlight of value. Our community say, oh man, we got through this together. So we're going to lift up and buttress some of these cultural institutions in our own neighborhoods. You know what I mean? I think it's a unique opportunity.
Absolutely. And that's all it is. And to your point, the pivoting is in our DNA. I find that, as a people, as a culture in this country, we're all about pivot. When you're the only Black person in X, fill in the blank, bro, your head's on a swivel, right? So I feel like this is what we're built for. So and when I see other people, jumping off the proverbial bridges and like, oh my gosh, life is so terrible. I'm looking at my Black brothers and sisters like, we're like, this is regular life. I don't know about y'all, but I'm used to not knowing where the hell my next thing's going to happen. So now you know how I feel. Welcome to my world. COVID, you with me now, so.
Yeah. Going to start this with Brother Miller. In your book, Black Smoke, you mentioned the Native American origins of barbecue. We know that American cuisine is fusion cuisine. These days, we see a lot of fusion restaurants, especially in the large major metropolitan areas. And this area, Afro-Cuban, Brazilian, Korean, Caribbean, Latin American, perhaps in your area, Afro-Mexican. Are these cuisines diluting the African and African-American traditions or enhancing it?
Oh, I definitely see it as enhancement, because I think some of the most vibrant and creative stuff going on in the culinary world is, in some cases, reconnecting to our roots, but also just seeking ways to find commonality with other cuisines around the world. I think it's exciting stuff. And I'm seeing more chefs do what I call diasporic dining experiences. So they'll have a multi-course meal, right? The first course will be inspired by someplace in West Africa. Then the next course may be in the Caribbean, then someplace in the American South, and then maybe something that speaks to the chef's story. But as someone who's really interested in building on the work of Dr. Jessica B. Harris, who looked at these connections between West Africa and the Americas, I'm excited to find out about these pockets where we have Africanized regions within other countries, right? Like so Veracruz in Mexico, Cartagena in Colombia, you know, other parts of the Americas. I'm hoping that we see more cooking and more people creatively bringing these dishes to the United States to not only teach us about our own food traditions, but the others, the food traditions of others, and show that commonality. One of the biggest applause lines I get when I speak is I talk about Bissap, you know, hibiscus, which is native to West Africa, how that winds up being agua de Jamaica or flor de Jamaica and sorrel. And people are like, wait a minute. I'm like, yeah, you go to a taqueria and you get that, you're drinking a riff off a West African drink. And people are like, oh, okay. So I love building those kind of connections. So I see it as enhancement.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I bet my entire life on it, you know what I mean? Because I thought that I need a twist, right? I think that nobody had ever done a burgeon with an Indian twist. They've done every other twist imaginable. But for us, you know, I view Indian food, you know, as a part of this conversation piece that is me. Not only that because of my daughters, but because of me and, you know, the connections between East Africa and everything else. You know, it's just, we are not apologetic about the influences of Black culture anymore, right? The fact that we talk about Newark as being a very Portuguese and Brazilian community, but we don't talk about the cultural relevance of Blackness in Brazil. In a place like Sao Paulo, which is the largest city
Yes.
in the Southern Hemisphere, right? And how Black it is. We can talk about jazz, we can talk about hip hop, we can talk about sports, but when it comes to food, it's like, no. Let's bring it back, and we're going to tell you this story because it's the one thing that we have to do to survive, right? And I think it's almost discredited, you know, where it's almost a caricature, and we're not being apologetic about those influences anymore, regardless of where we've landed on this ocean.
May I add something really quick to that? Because I think that's a really profound point. Yeah, I often tell people, okay, if you think about it, almost every aspect of Black culture has gone global, right? The way we talk, the way we entertain, dress, you know, all of that, except our food. And we don't have real cheerleaders for our food. And to the extent that our food does go global, it's disconnected from our story. So I'm really big on that. So thank you for mentioning that.
And it's one of those things, and, you know, Marcus Samuelson's, of course, he's opened up a restaurant in Newark, right?
Mhm.
And, you know, he's a very polarizing figure for some people because he's not the traditional, what we expect a Black person to be, because he's Ethiopian, raised in Sweden, right? And all. So, but when you talk about the fact that he's out here as a cheerleader to say, hey, listen, this is culture, right? It is us to take that baton and say, thank you, Brother Marcus. You know, let me introduce myself, you know, to the audience. You know, it's one of those things where we need all of these stories. Like the fact, it's not coincidental to me that we're here on behalf of a library. The griot, the same way that our traditions were not written, they were spoken, it's the same thing for food, right? And we have to piece those puzzles, you know, put those pieces of the puzzle together and really tell our story. So it's full circle.
Mhm.
Wow, wow, both what you brothers said, just absolutely. Yeah, it's very, I did not know. Again, I binge watched High on the Hog this week, and 3 or 4 episodes. And, I didn't know, Hercules, these great slave chefs, they created American food culture. I mean, to your point, Adrian, it's the thing is our Black culture, Black food is championed as American food around the world, but it's got a white face on it, right?
Mhm.
It wasn't until I saw your episode, and it just made so much sense that a Black cowboy is redundant. When you say a Black cowboy, it's redundant because they were cowboys. They're, hey boy, go wrangle those cows. Oh,
Mhm.
who's that? That's the cowboy.
Mhm.
How you go? It's like call somebody the N-word and then white people like, no, this is us now. It's like, what? How did this happen? But that's what's happened with our food. Hercules and the other chef, and I forget his name, the other slave
James
chef,
Hemmings.
right? These two, right? Like, it's obvious that it's us. When people come to America and have all this food, it's us. When people see Black food, they think soul food, right? They block it into this little box of slave food. Oh, you mean slave food? Oh, you mean the food of the inferior people? Oh, yeah, that's cool. That's something that the food that's not good for you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, you could have some. And then you go down south and they're like, oh, they talk about Southern food? Oh, wait, Southern food is white people food.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Wait a minute. How is it that the Black people cooked, but now it's yours? Okay, because that makes sense. So
as a student, as somebody that went to UVA, right? We tout Thomas Jefferson as the first culinary president. Oh, he was all his French influences. I bet you there's some ancestors in Virginia right now to say, well, it wasn't all French ancestors that were out there cooking in some of those places. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Wasn't. So it's telling the story. Something as basic as knowing who the names of these great chefs were, just acknowledging that and just putting it out there and having saying, wow, who are they? And let me go do some research. Oh, wow. Macaroni and cheese, really? It broke my heart that the descendant of the person who invented macaroni and cheese didn't know until she was later, like she was advanced in her age. That's a criminal. That's a crime. What if she knew about that when she was 5 or when she was 2? What trajectory would her life be on? Would she be at school talking mad? I'll be talking mad stuff at school, right? Oh, did your granddad invent macaroni and cheese? Mine did, right? What does that do, right? So anyway.
And just real quick, because I know we have other subjects, a very well-known chef who's not Black, I won't say his name, came up to me one time at an event and he said, how come y'all are letting other people make your food and get rich off of it?
What?
Yep.
We're letting other people make our food. All right.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. But I mean, I saw his point and he was talking mainly about fried chicken. I think right now, if you were to think about like famous fried chicken chefs, how many people think of an African-American instead of David Chang or Thomas Keller?
And we have
That's really facts.
Part of it is, for me, people think I'm very crude in certain instances, and people don't like this joke, but I was like, I'm not going to ever apologize for liking fried chicken and watermelon. They're both phenomenal,
delicious,
and everything else. It's like that Petey Green, episode, and it's sort of like I will sing about this stuff and not be, shucking and jiving and stuff like that. And as a person that now owns a traditional Jewish deli, right? And I see in these groups about this adherence to cultural cues, right? And for some people look at that and they tell me like, oh man, aren't you mad? I was like, no, they're proud of their culture, right? But when they talk to me and they understand who we are and what we're doing, they are proud that I'm doing this as well as somebody else. You know what I mean? And I'm not watering it down, and I'm paying homage to the people and I'm not denying, like, oh no, this is just a pastrami sandwich. No, this is where it comes from. And we're paying homage to the people just as we should expect people to pay homage to us and give us our due respect. And we need to step up and stop being apologetic for this food. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You made this point earlier that it's been sitting with me since you said it, but you talking about sort of the young people who are kind of picking up this really sort of important cultural baton. I think so much of what you're talking about is really this ownership of your voice and the work you're supposed to be doing. We sort of forfeit our own story, our own kind of agency in doing this work in our industry in ways that are nonsensical. We are the culture. We are like the practitioners of what we say to our guests about who we are. That relationship has been stilted and perverted and sort of contorted for a long time. I think that so much of the work like Adrian does, I mean, Raji talked about Hound and Hog a couple times here. I mean, Dr. Harris's book, the series was beautiful. That series is gratefully going to be a part 2, but that's a book that Dr. Harris wrote 10 years ago. Like that 10 years ago, she gave us this blueprint, this foundational timeline that told us about ourselves, back to ourselves. So many of the names that you mentioned that, you know, these young people, not just young people, but that sort of 10-year point since Hound and Hog, since Saki's building houses, since this sort of intentional language we're building and through books around what Black culture means, what our foodways mean. That's giving information to these chefs to deputize them, to make them more rigorous. Your point about other cultures, the other cultures you're talking about demand that the customer that they invite into their space contends with their food and culture. We don't do that in the same way. The reason that we lean so heavily on soul food is because that's the one place in Black culture is legible and clear and direct to the consumer about who we are. It's not the whole story. It's not and I think the pushback in a lot of times is about the narrowness of soul food. Soul food is expansive. Soul food is, if we only carried it forward, if we were only more intentional, more thoughtful about what its function was always supposed to be. It's a safe, clear space for Black folks to tell who we are to people we invite into our spaces. That framing allows us to cook whatever we want to cook. And I think that language, creating that language is really the work that you see happening. The reason that you love Kia so much is because she is so clearly unapologetic about who she is. And she is presenting herself to her customer, to her audience in whatever form she's in. Wow, if we were more brave earlier. Wow, what would it have looked like if we hadn't been that brave 20 years ago? So that's encouraging.
Amazing.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, again, just it should be, it should absolutely be required reading, required watching, Hind the Hog, because I learned, I thought I knew, again, everybody streams and watches Netflix and all these things, and I've seen so many of the chef's table, all these things, and I've seen everything, but it just strikes a chord. I mean, for me, what I came away with is, if more of us knew that the everyday food that we eat, that is known as American food is a direct result of us, I think it would just have a different, it would change everybody's perspective about American food, about what our contribution is, you know what I'm saying? And that for me is really what, I'm hoping this groundswell is happening, that we have to claim it back. This is always, the slaves always knew it was us, but they died off, and we got to remember, it's us. It always has been us, and we just have to, and like Kai said, just not be apologetic about it, and expose it for what it is, just for the benefit of us and just for the benefit of American culture. That's all.
Yeah, and I want to key on your word, groundswell. I think Chef Therese talked about this earlier too. It's fantastic that High on the Hog is going to be renewed for a second season, but I really hope that we see more storytelling by us about our food traditions. And one of the biggest frustrations back in the day when I would, trying to get my book sold, I would hear, oh yeah, nobody's going to read a book on soul food. We already got one in the market. And, these books 20 years old. And then how many books come out every year on French food, Italian food, some kind of Asian cuisine, but there's only room for one book of all of us, right? So I'm hoping that the phenomenal response to High on the Hog will be transformative for Black creatives in the food space. And we've seen some stuff, right? Chef Bryant Terry got his book deal where he's going to have an imprint. That's good. We've got people like Nicole Taylor and others getting book deals. So yeah, it's already starting to see some change. We just hope it's not fleeting.
Before I turn it over to Reggie, just want to mention, just think of these key crops. These are not all of them, but just some of the key crops that came from Africa: yams, okra, watermelon, cowpeas, rice, and coffee. Every day, somebody's eating all of these things. I mean, coffee global, rice global, every community and culture. So that's how important our contributions are to global cuisine and culture. Okay, Reggie?
Yes, I feel like, my next question I had queued up, I do feel like we've sort of covered some ground, but, I definitely want to make sure that we get to shout out Sister Nelson's Black Culinary History site, because I think that is a space for doing this work, the archiving. So I do want to ask you, again, we may have covered some of this. So, what led you to start the Black Culinary History, and, could you speak on, and I think we've kind of, speak on the importance of archiving, and also just another two-parter, what's maybe one of the most surprising facts you've discovered while researching for Black cultural history or Black culinary history?
Sure. I mean, I started the site in 2008. I was a young chef that had just moved back to New York. I left Newark first thing smoking, and figured I was going to go see some world and, get some training and figure out how to be part of this vast industry I had no real reference point for. And it was like the end of 2008 when we were in the midst of recession. And I was asking myself some really serious questions about what I was going to do next. A lot of the leaps I was taking professionally were changed overnight. If y'all remember that downturn, October of that year changed a lot of our industry. You see a lot of shifts in the next 15 years in terms of people's businesses. You see there's a pulse point. And so I was asking myself questions about how I was showing up as a chef. And I honestly was negligent. I was reckless in the stories I was telling. I was ill-informed about who I was and how I was showing up culturally. And I was trying to find a way to be more responsible. So I reached out to 30 people or so, people I knew about degrees of separation, chefs I admired, folks who were writing, who had some information I thought I could glean. And for the first couple of years, it was super selfish and cathartic, and trying to find a way to give myself a muse point that would kind of serve the work I would be doing. Over the years, it's shifted. It's more community focused. We're a global network. Our group on Facebook is really the sort of social hub of what we do, 5,000 plus members in that group. We crowdsource among ourselves. Folks who are writing or thinking or whatever can go to that group and usually get an answer pretty quickly about all manner of Black food and food culture. The site is evolving. In its current incarnation, is really sort of a starting point. I don't talk to high school or college students who email the site until they read one of the 3 books I recommend first before we have a sit-down conversation. But it really sort of, in this current form, is a starting point. If you are a chef, if you are someone who is picking up the cultural baton of being a hospitality professional, and you are Black, you are responsible to know who and what you are. The same way we are glamored and amazed by the world's 50 best, and we spend our dollars on the gastronomique, and we love modernist cuisine, and we fetishize, we per se, we should be as rigorous about who and what we are. But you can't do that work if you don't have information. And it's been profoundly gratifying over the years to have started a place where I felt like I didn't know much, to be in community with so many folks who are trying to give us clear language for who and what we are. I mean, our reading lists are growing every year because amazing cultural work is happening. I'm much more, Adrian has written 4 books at this point. And so your perspective as a writer is, I'm sure, informed by your personal experience, but I'm hopeful. Every year there's more work that's happening that is more rigorous and more thoughtful. You don't get to have a kid. You don't get to have Omar Tate. You don't get to have a lot of the chefs that you're talking about who are doing transformational work without them being able to be informed. And it's writers who are giving them language. And so the site is reading lists and videos and podcasts and all kinds of starting points, and take that information and be dope and do what inform yourself to be able to then show yourself but do that work, that primary work, and do it in the same rigorous way you do with every other cuisine that you're confronted with.
Mhm, mhm.
I love that idea. I'm gonna have to start giving people books before I sit down and talk to them.
Even excerpt, like, I mean, it used to be Hound the Hog, but right now it's Black food.
Yep.
But it's just to, if I'd have had Black food on my shelf when I was in culinary school, the level of spine straightening that I would have had, it's a book that I'm gifting to every young person who's going into this work. You are going to give your soul over to an industry that demands a lot of you. Are you really ready? Do you really know what you're about to jump into? And be fortified by words, be fortified to have, President's Kitchen Cabinet on your shelf, to have Hound Hog on your shelf when you are about to go into a very white, very male-dominated industry, will set you up to know yourself before these people tell you who you are.
Yeah.
That's really facts. That's really facts. I mean, I'm not a chef. I don't know anything about restaurants, but I like to eat good food. And I felt like just watching that just gave me some confidence when people try to fade me on the low, which happens a lot to everybody. And they play it off. But it gives you a background, because sometimes you walk into these spaces. I've been to French restaurants or these elevated places. You're like, man, I shouldn't even be here. Meanwhile, we invented like 3/4 of the dishes on this thing.
How about that?
You know what I'm saying? I'm saying that, it's just a different perspective. When you walk in, you can still feel intimidated, but that intimidation goes away when you know it's yours. And, and I don't know about the other people on the panel, because again, I don't want to hijack anything, but I gotta ask, I experience a lot of only experiences, like the only, and I don't know how you guys deal with that when you're in environments where you're the only Black person trying to do this thing, and you really don't have, and I'm generalizing. I'm not saying white people are all trying to get you, whatever, but it's a different vibe. Like, you try to tell me you told a white person, hey, if you want to get into craft beer, you got to go to places where it's like majority Black people. Like, I'm not sure if they'd be really down for that. So I just want to ask out there, how do you feel being the only? How do you still find the confidence to do your thing in a space that is really not really trying to get you in?
My answer is that I build community. So much of what Facebook has been really powerful, because I just started, there's a section I just added to the site. There's a restaurant map, and it's sort of in its beta form, but it's growing in scope. But our network is global. I'm not the only anything, really. I mean, you feel like you're the only, right? To Kai's point about being hyper local, about where you operate in your business and the tunnel vision of like trying to operate and do the work you want to do, it feels lonely. But in the beer world, Black, we need to talk offline. I know 20 names right now. I'm sure, I don't know how many of these people but like we are not as alone as we feel. And intentionality in terms of reaching out to folks is such a powerful use of social media, social networking. Globally, right? There are Black chefs in Amsterdam, in Tasmania, and just that are feeling alone, they may be lonely, but in this country, we're not the only. And there's so many of us that just want to feel connected and find ways that are easy and clear to be able to connect to one another. There are lots of organizations. I think trade organizations are a really great way to sort of start to connect to folks. I think finding sort of being profoundly subversive in a lot of these trade organizations, and sort of finding the Black contingent within them. When you meet other Black folks, inviting them to other trade organizations, because it's clear network. And I think we just have to kind of burst these arbitrary bubbles, because the feeling of loneliness or being only, I think, is really sort of about cloistering ourselves, and it's by design in a lot of ways, right?
True. I find that we don't, if you build community, if you're proud of who you are, you'll find that you'll attract people, right? Like,
True.
Freedom Riders weren't just Black folks, you know what I'm saying? So for me, it's coalition building, and it's also being, we're built for this. Unfortunately, where we are in the stage of our religion is one of we're just coming out. This is our exodus, right? So this is us coming out to the world and reclaiming ourselves and emancipating ourselves. We are but for like, you know, a few generations to, you know, so it's not that thing, you know, where I think the internet has made our global world smaller. And again, going back to what I said earlier, we're at 1 degree of separation. I can almost guarantee you, you know, wherever y'all went to school, I can name 5 people right now.
Sure.
Right? I don't care if it's Stanford on the West Coast, if it's Rutgers or it's Johnson and Wales. I can definitely pull in my phone right now and tell you 5 people that I know that are Black, that excelled at a high level, because that's what we've been. This is our exodus. We're all coming out and say, oh, let's go. This is not, you know, we have to stop being afraid. And also we have to, what I was going to say is we have to stop being afraid of the head nod.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We get into these places and you always look to say, all right, is the brother, sister going to, you know, hit me back? I'm not saying we got to be friends. I'm not saying we got to be friends, but there is an acknowledgement of the shared experience.
That's right.
Oh, the head nod. Damn.
Yes.
That can make or break the whole stuff, right? Like, wow. The
You know,
head
one
nod.
thing I want to add to the conversation, which is a different kind of spin on the onlyness, is because I was writing about food in the early days, and there's only a few people like Dr. Harris and maybe just a few other people doing it at that time. I have to say, when I was going around the country, like on book tours and stuff like that, most of my audiences were white. And even on social media and other things. And that was a frustration because I felt like I was writing the books for us.
Right.
But I think it's
Right.
because of the stigma that was associated with soul food. I mean, most of the shade that I got was like people, like Black people saying, why are you writing about that? Nobody wants to celebrate that. That's slave food.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah. So that's a different spin on that question, right?
Wow.
But in
That's
the
so
other
deep.
context and the way you asked it, yeah, I try to build community. So that's been a frustration.
Yeah, that's so deep that that's really deep that our people would be like, what? That's slave food. And you know, it's this, you know, that's a whole nother Zoom call. But but yeah, thank you for that, because and I, you know, I do find that, you know, since I've been open, all the Black beer nerds from around the country have come to, and you know, and they come to me and they're like, and they always ask me the same question, like, how did you do it? You know, and obviously I'm happy to share, which is part of the reason I'm starting a brew training program next month to help us.
Beautiful.
You know, right here, you know, Saturday mornings, 10 weeks, brew basics to connect us into this program, because craft beer is a booming, you know, again, I didn't know 10 years ago having a different beer was going to put me on this track to freedom, but craft beer really is freedom. It really is. It's equity, you know, it's ownership. It's, you know, I feel, I was born almost a month to the day before the Newark Rebellion. And I feel a connection to Newark that's very strong. And I was always saying my generation has a tough act to follow. How you gonna follow civil rights, bruh? That's like following MJ. Like, you gonna follow MJ, you're gonna put on, then you get the 23 jersey on you. You like, all right, you're now 20, you're number 23. I'm like, bro, what?
You follow MJ with LeBron, brother, and it's much better.
You're right. But right.
That's another Zoom call.
That's another Zoom call. Yeah. Yeah.
But to your point, you know, I feel like my generation or that generation in my mid 50s we're the equity generation. We're going to be the ones that are going to start owning things. We're going to own not only physical things, but we're going to own the story. We're going to own the narrative. We're going to take back the narrative, and we're going to write you know, we're the one that in 20 years from now, we're going to be able to you know, I want to be able to have a network that we should be able to green light our own stuff without any outside influence. And that's my goal of craft beer. That's my role. I want to be able to green light any Black, Latino, women-owned brewery. You know, I like the idea. I like you. Here you go. Make it happen.
That's good.
You know, Reconstruction, again, advanced our generation, or advanced our people like 5 generations, and in like a couple of generations we moved up like hundreds of years. So I feel like our impact, like I talked to a brother down south who's like, I want to skip a generation in my generation. I want my kids, when I go into the ground, I want my kids to be as well off as my grandkids or maybe my great grandkids. And I feel like just from this Zoom call alone, we definitely have, look, if Black women could put people on the moon.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Indeed, I like that.
Yeah. Being mindful of the time, I have a final question. Reggie has one as well, and then we'll ask for some final thoughts. My last question. We see Black celebrities enjoying huge success in food and beverage industries. I'm thinking Patti LaBelle, Sean Combs, Dwayne Johnson, for example. Does this celebrity success create unrealistic goals, or are these people asking us to dream bigger? And that's for anyone.
I don't think there are any unrealistic goals. You know what I mean? You know, nobody would go and say to Jeff Bezos, like, oh, you had an unrealistic goal. And then he built a company that was almost perfectly built and suited for a pandemic. You know what I mean? So for me, it's like, yeah, Diddy has done so much, and, you know, other people have done whatever. I mean, that's just the power of celebrity. You know, for us, I tend to not like, you know, I don't like my picture taken. I'm getting texts saying, yo, you have to speak louder because I hate the sound of my own voice. But the thing is, you have to lead with your product. And if your product stands for itself, Patti LaBelle, you know, she just, you know, it's what it's there for. You know what I mean? Nobody that wants their grandmama's sweet potato pie is also like, yo, let me get a Patty's. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
There's room for everybody. We have to understand in the Black community that the world is a lot bigger than the Central Ward. You know what I mean? There are billions of people that want to consume our culture, right? So for me, my pivot is not necessarily, I don't want to own 20 stores. I want to have my sauces in every Costco, in every, you know, I want the restaurants to buy my sauces from me to say, hey, listen, so when you go into the terrible Fridays at the airport, yeah, let me get some wings with Walla sauce on it. I don't really, it's mine, it's branded.
Right.
You know what I mean? We have to stop, you know, with this small thing. And yeah, sometimes you have to be, like I said, hyper local, because that's what you want to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, if, as I listen to my daughters get ready for, you know, school and going to bed, you know, if you ask me to do this all over again, I might just have a shack that I just ran by myself. You know what I mean? I've talked to, you know, when you're in the room with some of the biggest people, you know, sometimes they say, well, man, it was good when I was that small. You know what I mean? Because there's value in that. We also don't talk about economic freedom in our communities, right? Because we think that freedom and success is $500,000.
Yep.
$5 million.
Yep.
I will show you that if you made $75,000 a year, how great your life could be. You know what I mean?
And I had a white handkerchief right now, bro.
You know, but it's just one of those things where it can be whatever you want to be. It can be small and successful, and it can be large and successful, but you have to be willing to know what that planning looks like. You know what I mean? Like, for instance, Therese talked about, like, not liking the restaurant. I hate catering. Because for me, I like the individual, like, man, I love the finesse of a single order. And you get 200 tickets and you're like, I can feel each one. You know, something that 200 people are going to eat. I'm like, man, it's like, I don't know how to, all of a sudden I get all tongue tied, you know what I mean?
No, that's really beautiful, man. Honestly, I mean, you really just hit it on the head. I haven't made this amount of money since I was like, you know, 21, you know. I've never made this. This is like, I made this salary when I was 21 years old, and I'm old. So, you know, I'm not making bread, but the freedom I have when I come to work, it's not work. When I'm out there, it's not work. When people come to me, when my staff comes to me and needs me, it's free. I'm free. And for the first time in my, honestly, I thought I was free making bread for other people. I'm more free now, making less bread, owning more things, because I'm helping other people. This is part of, like, none of us don't need to be here. We could be doing other things that make us money, but we're giving back, because this is what it's all about. So my freedom, the fact that I'm giving to the community, that I'm hopefully inspiring a group of people, there's no price on that. And freedom does not mean money. Freedom means you can live the life, you can self-actualize, whatever that means to you. But you need to self-actualize. I'm tired of us, and we're living on that level one of just surviving. And there's always going to be poor people, but we should be, as a people, we should be on that top of the pyramid. When will we self-actualize and focus on that?
So, yeah, thank you. Definitely.
Sister Nelson, you have a.
Oh no, it's just, I think it's such an interesting question. I think one that we've been having for a very long time in the culinary space about this, the power of celebrity, the power of visibility, I think is the main thing. I think the heart of what you're trying to ask is, does visibility in this front-facing way, is it helpful or hurtful or harmful? And I think the short answer is that I think that it's helpful. Your point about celebrities, I think, is that they wouldn't invest money in spaces that aren't valuable, right? So you look at the investment of celebrities in the beverage space, like they see the potential, they see the idea around Black culture being able to drive these spaces. The more interesting part of that question, I think, would be to look at these brands and these specifically the food brands. Look at who the Black creativity that's actually driving the tangible work of those brands, right? Who's actually making patty pies, right? Who's actually like the celebrity chefs in terms of restaurateurs. A lot of the front-facing folks who are doing the visible work aren't the ones who are actually cooking the food that you're dining at when you go to the restaurants. And so the more interesting question, I think, is to sort of say, yes, visibility helps, but, or yes, and that we should also be lifting up and thinking about and celebrating the lives and the bodies of the folks who are actually on the ground doing this work every day, making those brands legible and consistent. And I think that's probably the more wantable thing to sort of encourage young people to be looking at. I think for a long time we were, especially I grew up in the age of, sort of television or cable television becoming, or food television kind of becoming part of the zeitgeist in an important way. And it would be a mistake to sort of think that what you see on television is what this work really is all about. And so that little bit of shift in perspective, I think, just in all things is critical and sort of gives us enough information to should draw you in, be excited, interested in this industry, but actually understand what it takes to do it consistently and profitably.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Well said.
Yeah, thank you. This is such a rich conversation. We still got, there's so many questions. And may get to one more, but I do want to acknowledge just the, just the stream of comments, basically some positive people who appreciate the conversation. So some comments on Facebook, and then I did notice in the comments here, someone wanted to lift up the work of Tony Tipton Martin. I don't know if we'll get to cover. I'm sure. Like I know we could do another two. But I'm hungry. Seriously,
quickly, like the Jemima Code, I think, is a companion book that you have to have on your show. The way she gave us context for 200 years of Black brilliance in cookbooks is certainly a beautiful cocktail book, but then the Jubilee gives us how to cook those recipes. And so please buy this book. It is so beautiful. It is so intentional in every element, from the weight of the paper to the eggshell blue of the cover to the kerchief on the front. Like, it's all such a labor of love. Buy her book immediately.
I just want to say two quick things. Number one, shout out to Brother Reggie for the J Dilla representing the back. Rest in peace. Legend. If you don't know J Dilla, the beats, whatever. And two, again, from High on the Hog, I didn't know that Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's, they put Black people on these labels to show authenticity to white people. Okay. So, like, look, should I buy that? Oh, there's a Black woman on it. Oh, I'm buying it because Black people know how to cook. So yes, derogatory images. However, a sign of authenticity. So,
Yep.
yes.
There's a whole blues narrative, but again, that's another Zoom call, because the blues is definitely authenticity. We'll set something up down the line over at Four City.
Word.
I have one more. It probably had to be a quick question for Brother Miller. It's been out the corner of my eye all night, and I guess I'll just throw that out real quick. As succinctly as possible to answer. Veganism, barbecue. What was the actual, we've always had Black vegans and vegetarians, perhaps social media has brought the community together. Does veganism impact barbecue?
Oh, yeah.
Come on, man. You talking about sugar-free brownies? You talking about sugar-free brownies? Get out of here, bro. Sorry.
No,
Go ahead, brother.
No, man. Across the board, the most vibrant and creative cooking I think that's going on is in the vegans and plant-based space. I'll say that because vegan and vegetarianism. And so you've got emerging plant-based barbecue. There's a place in California called Vegan Mob. Dude is blowing it up. A lot of seasoned vegan in Harlem.
Is it really good though, brother Adrian?
Yeah, it was tasty. No, seriously, it was tasty. It was
real,
tasty.
for real.
Yeah. It's not barbecue, right? It's not, but it's tasty.
Would you go again?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, seasoned vegan in Harlem.
I had our veggie burger with one of your beers for lunch, Roger. I'm telling you, you're gonna come over to the dark side, brother.
You know what, Kai? Yo, if you're around tomorrow, bro, I'm gonna come down and try this veggie burger on the set for real.
But one of the biggest kind of vibes right now is in barbecue is people are using jackfruit to mimic pulled pork. And if a person knows what they're doing, they can actually replicate the taste and texture of pulled pork, even though it's jackfruit, which is a fruit native to South Asia. So yeah, no, man, it's definitely impacted barbecue. That and turkey, I would say, are the two big trends in Black barbecue right now. Yeah.
I'm gonna trust you because I put respect on your name, so I'm gonna trust you.
A lot of pressure, man, but no, it's good.
No, we're good. I think Kai got me, so we'll see.
All right.
We have we're probably over time, so if we could get a quick 1-sentence wrap from our panelists, and then we're going to close. Thank you ever so, Sister Nelson.
Just read more. There's so much amazing content available for you at your fingertip digitally. I mean, my site, sure, go to it, but there's a woman out of Canada named Ozo Soko who runs a site called Feast Afrique, and she has access so many interesting, disparate, out of print content that's available all digitally, and it's so dope. So, I mean, there's nothing but possibilities if you just crack a book. The information is right there for you.
Thank you. Brother Campbell?
Honestly, just thank y'all. I think that, Therese said, be dope earlier. I second that. Just be fly and be unapologetically Black, and just strive for excellence. I mean, the fact that I'm here, I feel like I'm just honored to be in the presence of some of these folks whom I've heard of in the past. Roger, I've consumed a lot of your product. But
same here, bro.
But again, it's the library putting this on, putting me in the room with Ms. Nelson, Mr. Miller. I'm honored. I think that we are just trying to get started, and that we hope to not let people down in this continuum of Black culture.
Thank you, Brother Apollon. Your final thoughts, sir.
Wow. I mean, I wish if this could be a weekly Zoom call without the extra people. No disrespect to the extra people, but this was a real honor and pleasure for me. Being, Newark is my birth city. I taught in Newark for 10 years. Brother Reggie, I mean, words can't describe the relationship, the friendship, the connection. Ever since we met, just a lot together. Sister Dale, just met you online and seen you. I hope to see you in person. But everybody on this call, again, I felt like a superhero. I feel like a superhero on this call.
Thank you.
And honestly, I'm honored to be part of this group. This group energizes me, and I look forward to adding to this group. And I know there's some people on this call, the participants, that will probably be joining us on this call a year from now. So I look forward to that too.
Thank you. Thank you. And our certified barbecue judge, Brother Brewer. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you again for providing the space. So happy to be in it. I would say we need to love ourselves. We need to love each other and love our food. It just kills me that we don't love our food the way that other cultures, people in other cultures love their food. Soul food is a complex heritage from Western Africa, Western Europe, and the Americas. Complex ingredients and traditions all coming together with a level of artistry and virtuosity that should be celebrated. So take another look at our food traditions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. This has been phenomenal. Thank you so much. We've learned a lot, and I'm sure our viewers were inspired to open that restaurant or bar or food truck, or to cook at home or teach their children to cook. We hope so. We hope so. On behalf of Jocelyn Bowling Dixon, Director of the Newark Public Library, and Dr. Lauren Wells, President, Library Board of Trustees, we thank you all for being with us this evening. Thank you to our phenomenal panel, Roger Apollon Jr., Kai Campbell, Adrian Miller, and Therese Nelson. Much continued success to you all. Again, if you'd like to purchase any of the books that we talked about, any or all of Brother Miller's books, please check out the good people at the Source of Knowledge bookstore, 867 Broad Street. You can visit them here in Newark, or you can visit them at sourceofknowledge.com, and they'll help you out. Black owned and operated in the community since 1992. Thank you to the PNC Foundation for ongoing support of the Newark Public Library's Black History celebrations. This is their 15th year in supporting us, and we appreciate them. Many thanks to my JBAR colleagues, Reggie Blanding, Alicia Grant, and Austin Williams, and our Assistant Director for Special Collections, Ingrid Betancourt. This program will be available for review on the library's YouTube channel soon, so check that out. Technical support was wonderfully provided by Diego Quintero, supervisor of our IT department. Thank you, Diego. Diego, if you're able to, could you screen share that flyer for our next program? I'll tell you what we're going to do next week. From the ground up, the struggle and resilience of Black farmers, where we'll look at the history of sharecropping and traditional farming. We'll talk about the class action lawsuit Pigford v. Glickman, which outlines the ongoing fight for justice for Black farmers and the growth of community and urban farming. In 1920, there were about 1 million Black farmers. Today, only about 45,000. So there's lots to talk about there. So please join us on Zoom or Facebook. Again, thank you all. Be well and good night.
Thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Yep,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all so much.
Thank you.